Well, welcome one and all to the Giro d'Italia from Hertfordshire, courtesy of Watt Bike, who is celebrating what many would say is the most beautiful but also the toughest of the Grand Tours with their Ride the Giro series for owners of Watt Bikes on the Watt Bike Hubb app. You can see here 8 of the toughest climbs from this year's Giro. Now at the back end of June I'm taking part in Marmotte, a big Gran Fondo in the French Alps, 176 kilometres and 5,000 metres of ascending. So super keen to continue my climbing practice. Therefore, having 8 fresh new climbs courtesy of the Watt Bike Hubb is a bit of a godsend in all honesty. I mean, I love Zwift and Mont Ventoux and Alpe d'Huez, but having a fresh stimulus is super exciting. It also gives me an opportunity to practice and refine some of the concepts I learned from Adam Isherwood at his Oxford University laboratory in terms of the pacing and preserving muscle glycogen, but also in terms of the nutrition. And I figured whilst I'm at it, I would demonstrate how I use some of these concepts from Adam in order to fuel the Mallorca 312. They say it's the eating Gran Fondo, and definitely it was for me. So the intent today is to ride all 8 of the climbs in Watt Bike's Ride the Giro series in one go, in order to demonstrate and replicate roughly how I fueled for the Mallorca 312, both before the event and during the event. Well, I'm easing myself into things with Santa Cristina, about 12.9 kilometres and 1,000 metres of ascending, but it's got a super easy low gradient for the first kind of 6 kilometres or so, and that's going to help me find my rhythm and my equilibrium, i.e. bring up the heart rate, warm the blood, and get a nice circular pedalling motion, i.e. pushing through with the heel and leading back with the heel for that circular motion, and hopefully a 50-50 left-right balance. And therefore, by the time we get to mid-distance, I'm hoping to ramp the power to my target power for all the climbs, about 225 watts, i.e. at and around my aerobic threshold, the point at which the lactate starts to get accumulated in the blood, but at a very manageable sort of 2.5 millimoles. Therefore, a nice, reasonably rapid endurance pace, but at the same time sparing muscle glycogen. Well, some muscle glycogen relative to being at a higher power. Let's go. I'm dual recording on the Wahoo Bolt with the Asioma pedals. That's because it's only the second time that I've ridden this Watt Bike Atom Generation 2, brand new. Feels good so far. And I want to compare how the power outdoors on the Asiomas, well, compares to the power indoors on the new Atom. You know, the first really third to a half of the event, you feel super easy. That's the intent. And then you know you're kind of conserving energy and hopefully a bit of mental fortitude for the second half when it counts. And for me, on the Mallorca 312, that was definitely the final. I say final, boy oh boy, it was a long final, 152 kilometres. Now in terms of the pacing, I guess it starts a few days before. Now for me personally, I'd never been to Mallorca before. Therefore I wasn't going to squander my time there with an extended taper. That might be the right strategy, but it wouldn't have been as enjoyable. So the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I had some pretty hard rides, including some big blocks of tempo and a lovely threshold effort on Sacalobra. However, even I realised, the idiot in me realised, that I needed to take it easy on a Thursday. So I had a full rest day on a Thursday and then a nice easy ride on the Friday. The event is on the Saturday. The easy ride was a cafe stop with everybody from All Things Ride, about 50 kilometres and 100 watts. A lovely spin out of the legs, keep the body nice and flexible and supple, and prepare for the next day. So similarly, this week, I've had 3 and 4 days off the bike due to travel with work to Munich and Frankfurt. So last night, I had a quick half-hour spin on the Watt Bike Pro, just to remind the legs what cycling's all about. Now the Mallorca 312 is known as the eating Gran Fondo because energy in versus energy expended is critical for sustaining the endurance and completing the event. And energy in basically equates to carbohydrates which get converted into glycogen in the muscle but also in the liver. And therefore being aware of energy in and carbs in, and energy out and carbs out is critical. We're going to touch a bit more on that and the science behind that, and flash back to Adam Isherwood's Oxford laboratory shortly. Safe to say, carbs are important. Therefore, I had a big old dinner, and I took the advice from James from Ride Harder, and also Chris Froome. Check out my historic videos as to how he used rice to power his win on a Col de Finestre in the Giro. I basically took their advice and maxed out on the rice for dinner. Check it out. Pre-event, it's not a race, it's definitely not a race, it's an event. Pre-event dinner. All of the rice and a little bit of the protein. But look what pickle it's got for himself. That's not for tonight. He's made the effort to cut it. That is for an aperitif before the morning, I guess. Yes. Is that going in the bike?
Yes, in the rucksack.
What, a rucksack on the bike?
Yes. You're carrying it.
He's taking a rucksack with him, a rucksack of food. So I had 2 plates of that, high in carbs and lean protein, very low in fat. Great for topping up the glycogen stores in the muscles and in the liver. The body can take about 500 to 700 grams of glycogen across the liver and the muscles in total. And the idea being, have a big dinner, get everything topped up nicely to the max. Now Paul Hamblett, who you saw there, he had about 5 plates. That guy never bonks on a ride. I'm getting towards the top of the first climb. I'm feeling good, as I should. Now because I've been filming and talking, all I've been doing is sipping my drink. Time to get on with the fueling on the bike. But certainly, at the end of the first climb, you don't want to be feeling like you're all in. Now time is pressing, so I'm going to get on with the second climb. I'll report back in a bit. So having had a big dinner, and hopefully got at least 500 to 700 grams of carbs in the muscles and the liver, time for 6 hours sleep. You've got to get up early for these big events, especially the 312. But when you get up, your glycogen stores are a little bit depleted. You use about 10 grams of carbs per hour to create the energy the body needs to repair damaged cells, but also to keep the brain ticking over. So, time for a good breakfast to top those glycogen stores back up. Check out what I have for the 312 now. Time to replace it with some slow digesting carbohydrates, complex carbohydrates that will take time to break down and provide the energy for the event. My go-to is of course the rolled oats, honey and yogurt. The rolled oats are complex carbohydrates. They take a long time to get broken down into glycogen and therefore are going to fuel the early hours of the event. The yogurt obviously to break it all up, the honey for taste, but also it's a nice little early sugary, fast digesting carbohydrate early in the morning to kind of perk you up alongside the coffee. And you're going to be in a calorie deficit for an extended period of time today, therefore don't be afraid to be generous with the serving of honey here. Look at that, drizzle it all over. It's not going to bloat you up or anything like that. It's going to add a little bit of, I guess, nitroglycerine to perk you up, certainly when it's cold on the start line, and fire you up for the first few hours of the event. So with glycogen stores fully topped back up and high on the nitroglycerine of the honey, time to hit the start line and stand around for a good hour almost before I rolled across at 20 to 7 in the morning. In that time again, of course the brain is working overtime and it's cold and you're using energy. Now, we're about 55 minutes into the ride, so very soon time to eat my first bar. I tend to take on the solid fuels definitely in the first half to 2/3 of the event. They take a bit longer to digest than the gels and the water, and I tend to sip the water with the carbs in it at the same time throughout the event. But let's go back to March 2022 to Oxford University, Adam Isherwood's Oxford laboratory, to understand a little bit more about the imperative of taking on enough carbohydrates while you're on the bike. 180 watts.
So 180 watts, pretty easy effort. This figure here is the grams of carbohydrate per hour that Phil's burning, and this is an accurate estimate because this is actually based on basically the ratio of carbon dioxide he's producing to oxygen he's using, and you can quite accurately actually estimate from that what fuels he's burning, because they have differing profiles in terms of the relationships between those two. As you can see here, so this is at 180 watts. This is, you know, very much all-day power. It's jumping up and down a little bit just as you know, it feels breathing rate changes and things like that. But you can see that the rate of carbohydrate he's burning through it's well over 100 grams per hour. It's above basically the rate at which you can feed yourself at carbohydrate. In terms of carbohydrate provision per hour, you know, the maximum amount you can probably take on is 90 to maybe 100 grams. You've got a very well-trained gut and you can handle it. He's in a net deficit for carbohydrate. So you do this for long enough, or you ride it up higher than 180 watts, which is, you know, what most people would potentially be looking to do if they're pretty well trained for century rides and things like this. And you're really burning into your glycogen stores, because your body needs to be using this carbohydrate. It doesn't want to use fats. Fat's less efficient in terms of oxygen use, and it can't get it from the carbohydrate you're feeding to yourself, because that's capped out about, yeah, as I said, 90 grams per hour. So it's having to tap into internal stores, into muscle glycogen levels, into liver glycogen levels. These glycogen stores are limited, and you know, therefore you're on a fast track to bonking, basically. Well, not necessarily a fast track, but you're on the path towards it. And higher intensities, the more rapidly you'll get towards it.
Well, welcome back. You join me at the beginning of the 4th climb. I'm feeling good, as I should. I've stayed on top of the nutrition, and I've kept the pacing measured and controlled. About 210 to 230 watts. Now the big takeaways you just saw from Adam Isherwood are as follows. Number 1, even at a nice easy endurance power, 180 watts, I'm still getting through about 140 grams of carbs per hour and 12 grams of fat. Secondly, most of us, me included, are going to struggle to eat much more than 90 to 100 grams of carbs per hour. Third takeaway is, as the power goes up, so does the rate of carbohydrate utilization. At and around my anaerobic threshold of 270 watts, I was burning 200 to 220 grams of carbs per hour. And the fourth takeaway is that the bigger the rider, and or the more powerful the rider, the greater the energy requirement, the more carbs you're going to be using per hour.
What do I eat and drink on the bike? Well, basically as much as I can carry in my jersey pockets and also my bottles. 4 energy gels here, each of them has 23 grams of carbohydrates in them. These 2 have caffeine in there as well. I use them a bit later on in the event when you need a little bit of a boost. Also 5 energy bars. Each of these has about 40 grams of carbohydrates in them. Not very much fat in there either as well, about 2 grams there. You don't want a lot of fat in your food when you're riding. It slows the absorption of the carbs and the breakdown of the carbs into glycogen to create the energy. I love these because 40 grams comes in a very small size. Right, probably a bit more convenient with that, but that provides a bit of a difference in texture and taste. This is basically the emergency Coke on the road if you don't have access to an emergency Coke. It's a guavan energy bar, a Colombian guava energy bar. Instant hit of fast digesting carbohydrates to give you a boost. Rarely do I use it, but when you do, it's pretty good. A couple of sorines, just a change of texture and the taste. And for the same reason, I adore these dates, which don't have any of the stones in them. Now turning to the bottles, each of these bottles has 750 mils of water in them. You can see a much bigger bottle compared to my head. You need all of that water in order to dilute the 80 grams of carbs that's contained in each of these sachets. I'll fill 2 of these up before the event. As it happens, for the 312, I actually used apple juice just for a different taste. And then I'll take 1 on the road with 1 of these sachets of electrolytes to mix in at one of the feed stops. I'll put electrolytes in each of the 2 bottles that I fill up before the event. Now naturally, we don't have the team cars and domestics handing us fresh bottles and more food, so the feed stops are a critical part of the event. I personally like to press on a little bit further and not use them all initially, because it takes time faffing around. I don't like that process of getting going again, having stopped with sticky legs. Up to 137 kilometers there in the 312 before I replenished the water and kind of topped up the glycogen stores.
the pedaling technique is a bit more right dominant and the efficiency has fallen from 65. An indication of fatigue. You can see also just coming to the end of the climb, pacing has been disciplined, but the heart rate has been creeping up versus the first 3 climbs. Will you join me towards the end of the 5th climb? Water roller, the going is harder, much warmer, and the power is down a little bit. We're still feeling okay, controlling the effort. So we're well over halfway into the climbing at the end of this. And definitely it'll be time to have a little feed stop. But before that, I just want to touch on hydration. Obviously critical, but in addition to the hydration, so are the electrolytes. Electrolytes being salt, calcium, potassium. And they are critical for a lot of functions in the body, regulating different things like heart rate, hydration, by water getting into the cells, production of energy in the muscles. And therefore you don't want to deplete your electrolytes too much. If you find you have a lot of salt stains on your kit, that is a sign of you overly depleting all of those vital, critical electrolytes. This multi-roller's got a bit of a sting in the tail. It's steeper at the end here. As an FYI, I do like to break up the climbing in and out the saddle. It gives different muscle groups a rest. Yeah, the heart rate's a bit higher out of the saddle, but then what I'll find is that my legs, quads, and my backside doesn't ache as much through mixing it up. Anyway, looking forward to the simulated food stop. A very discerning brand of Swiss roll indeed. So here we are at the first simulated feed stop, and definitely a great opportunity to take on plenty of carbohydrate and replenish glycogen stores. You want fast digesting, hence the Swiss rolls that they had on offer at the 312 were perfect. They were a little bit bigger and had loads of sugar on the outside. So I'm going to eat 3 or 4 of these right now, but also going to take down a full fat Coca-Cola. It's got about 40 odd grams of fast digesting carbs in it, plus a bit of caffeine. It's a great little pick me up and will help get you through the sticky legs that you're definitely going to get when you get back on the bike and start pedaling. I can report, Lovat Swiss rolls are indeed excellent. They make exceedingly good Swiss rolls. That's good. And a big bonus of taking on all the carbs while you're not pedaling is the fact that you're not really depleting your glycogen stores very much. So all of those fast digesting carbs are going to help top up the glycogen stores in the muscle and the liver, help with the energy a little bit later on in the event. Well, back on the bike, and I really don't want to be, but taking on the Menador. There we go, and it isn't trivial, as you can see. Definitely time to crack on before the mind gives out. As expected, the legs feel very reluctant, sticky, as Paul Hamblett would say. Therefore, I'm not going to chase the watts. If I hold my nerve and get through the next 5 minutes or so, all will be well as the blood warms back up. Well, I forgot to add that at my simulated feed stop, I also topped up the water bottles and added electrolytes to both and 80 grams of carbs to one. Boy oh boy, is this proper tough. Loads of ramps of 14 to 18%. It's taking forever to complete about 7 or 8 kilometers. Glad I had the full fat Coke. Up and out of the saddle is the only way I can make forward progress at the moment. Look out for the Menador on stage 17 of the Giro. 2 kilometers to go. That's about 3 hours worth.
It may be smaller, but it's rougher and tougher than the blockhouse.
And when I said it wasn't going to be trivial, boy oh boy, that wasn't an understatement. Really, really hard. Next on the list, Marmotte. A long one, but a nice, easy, I guess, first 6 kilometers or so. So I'm going to crack straight on with it. And then ahead of Blockhouse, I'm going to have my second simulated food stop. Well, you find me with spirits low on the Marmotte, the shallow path. And I often find you get a dip in spirits at some point during a long ride. For me, the key is not to chase the power. It's just to keep the pedals turning and try and find a cadence and a level of effort that feels manageable. But a pro tip is to say thank you, which you'll always be saying thank you, but say thank you especially to any of the supporters and all the marshals and organisers along the way. Gracias! Gracias! Gracias. 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 This really is man versus virtual Marmotte. Proper hard. I really struggled on the shallow part, but didn't chase the watts. And seeing on the steeper segment here to find a rhythm out of the saddle. Still 3.4k to go, and it seems to stay steep until the end. Proper difficult this. Well, that Marmotte was proper difficult. From about 6.5 kilometers, it was just steep, unrelenting steep, but I kind of found that pace out of the saddle and just about got through it, but I'm absolutely shattered. And the Menador before it absolutely destroyed me. I mean, that was even steeper, but only for 7 or 8 kilometers. Only for 7 or 8 kilometers. Brockhouse is now on the agenda, but first a feed stop and a proper little break to take on some carbs. Well, welcome to feed stop number 2, and it's all turning out a little bit harder than I'd envisaged. To say the second feed stop is busy would be something of an understatement. I reckon an hour indoors is harder than an hour out, and you haven't got the descents to kind of recuperate and relax. Equally, after the descent, the legs do feel sticky, so I'm not sure if it's a mixed blessing or not. Anyway, not that I'm really looking forward to these, but I know I'm going to need them to complete the final climb, Brockhouse. Warm Swiss roll. Make mental note not to leave in the sun next time. I'm forced feeding myself a full fat coat. I'm not trying to make out that this is healthy eating. This is just simply about getting carbohydrates into the system, into the liver, into the muscles, into the blood. Fast digesting is the name of the game at this stage. Oh dear me. And this is where you really don't want to eat anymore. So having some carbs in the bottle, taking down the Coke, it's an easy way to hopefully reboot the system just enough to complete the mere 18 kilometers and 1500 meters of climbing for Brockhouse. And there it is in all its glory, just shy of 19 kilometers and 1500 meters of elevation. Heading towards the middle of Brockhouse. Needless to say, life is difficult right now. It's very steep, about another 3 or 4 kilometers, and in all honesty, I'd love to just get off the bike right now, but nearly there, 11k to go. And after the steep stuff, it shallows off a bit. Taking on loads of the carbs now, just through the bottle. I can't face actually eating or digesting. I'll probably have another gel in a minute as well, as soon as it levels off a bit. Coming up for a kilometre to go. I am all in right now. Just about sustaining 170 watts on the Atom, 180 odd on the Bolt. The Bolt has been about 10 watts higher throughout. This has been a lot harder than I'd envisaged. Dear me, am I glad to see the end of this. Coming to the end now. There we go. Sweet relief.
You've got nothing to add.
Dear me. So, the Bolt tells me 6 hours 50. I'd estimate about 7 hours 10, including the stops, maybe a tad less. Average power 196, normalised 206, about 10 watts lower on the Atom. 357 TSS, more than adequate. Now it says here a left-right balance of 50-50 on the Asiomas. It was showing something like 48-52 on the Watt Bike, so I'm not sure what's going on there. But trying out indoors, and it's a hot day as well. But good practice for La Marmotte, and definitely I'm going to tot up the carbs in a second, but I ate as much as I possibly could. I mean, I'm feeling pretty unable to eat or drink right now, so just goes to show, if you eat enough,
you can keep producing the power. I mean, I was clinging on to the 180 watts on the Bolt, 170 odd on the Watt Bike towards the end there, but it was still pretty consistent. Cheers, Jane. Gracias.